Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the July SILA Foundation webinar, The Art of Negotiation. I'm Cindy Davidson, the Education Trustee for SILA Foundation, and today we're delighted to be hearing from Scott Addis of Beyond Insurance. Scott is going to walk us through the 5 tactics that drive successful negotiations. In our industry, negotiation takes place in so many different areas, in claims resolution, coverage disputes, loss control, recommendations, audits, pricing, recruiting, mergers and acquisitions, and so many more areas. Negotiation is something we can all get better at, right? So we have an hour, and although you are all on mute, we will take questions through the Q&A function, and Scott will address them at the end. Please let us know if you're having any technical issues through the chat, and we will try to help you out. And by we, I mean our excellent SILA webinar managers. I'd like to give a shout out, a special thanks to our July webinar sponsor, Addis Banker & Company. We have just recently opened up our webinars to sponsorship, and we're so grateful to Addis Banker for stepping up and going first. Now I'm going to turn this session over to Scott, and I'll be back at the end to wrap us all up. Scott, the screen is all yours.
Cindy, thank you very much, and welcome to today's program. I'm joined by Ashley Carell, the Chief Operating Officer of Beyond Insurance. Ashley, thank you for joining today.
Sure. Hi, everyone.
Let me start with SILA. You talk at servant leadership. This is an organization, as you know, selfless, empathetic, committed to the growth of others. Mary Ellen and Cindy and Mary Kay and team, thank you so much for all you guys do for the industry. You are servant leaders. And to AD Banker, special thanks to you, today's sponsor. As you know, AD Banker is a wonderful training and coaching firm out of Overland Park, Kansas, who prepares pre-licensing professionals to pass insurance and security licensing exams. I'm honored to be with you and joined by Ashley. In my early 20s, I was working with a company called Johnson Higgins. It's now part of Marsh. It's hard to believe, but we were the largest privately held insurance broker in the world, and Marsh was our big enemy, and in 1996, I believe that was the year the two firms merged. But anyhow, while there, as a young guy that was trying to progress in my career, negotiation was very clearly something that we were asked to go ahead and master. But while I did go ahead and try to learn the essentials as well as some advanced negotiation techniques, please know that every day I try to sharpen the arrows in my quiver when it comes to negotiation, as I hope you will. As was said earlier, please chat in questions, comments. We're all in this together. So if you have a negotiation technique, you have a negotiation story you think we should hear, please let us know. Now to the world of Beyond Insurance. I'm very proud. We help organizations and individuals with growth mindsets. Today, so many people have fixed mindsets. The world of COVID-19 has made us feel as though we have less control over the outcomes of our actions. But a person with growth mindset clearly says, you know what, no matter how difficult circumstances are, I must have a growth mindset. We also help people with real unrealized potential in life. It's so critical. No matter where you are, no matter how good you are, how you progressed, would you agree you still have more potential? Differentiation is a very key area, helping people innovate, transform, but negotiation is also a key part of what we do. Okay, I do have to admit I am a baseball fan. I'm still trying to hang in with Major League Baseball. I did have a chance to play through college. Had an aspiration of playing professionally, so I do apologize. But what I want to do now is to reflect upon what we have been through, because next week, believe it or not, Major League Baseball will begin a 60 rather than 162 game schedule in the midst of COVID-19. The game, by the way, will have a very different look and feel, including a COVID-19 injury list, lineup cards submitted electronically, a no speeding rule, team mascots barred from the fields. Can we imagine that? The Philly Fanatic, in my home is Philadelphia, will not be on the field. And you're not allowed to throw the ball around the horn. Now, although the games will begin on July 24th and 25th and end on September 27th, the negotiations that took place this May and June, as you may know, were chaotic and damaging to the sport. After 4 weeks of partisan bickering that ranked the levels of nastiness rarely seen outside even the corridors of Washington, D.C., the 38-member player executive board and owners could not agree on the terms for the 2020 season. It's interesting, a June 26th article in the New York Times went as far as to say the contentious negotiations between Major League Baseball and the Players Union that nearly killed the 2020 season only deepened the schism that could soon swallow up the sport. Fred Clare, who's a general manager of the Los Angeles Dodgers from 87 to 98, stated, with the letters that went back and forth, with the language being used, with a total display of lack of trust, it was terrible. And there was a big hurdle in front of us, the 2021 collective bargaining agreement. To permit the game of baseball to be played this year, Rob Manfred, who's a commissioner of baseball, upheld a March 26th agreement by setting a schedule of his desired length and guaranteed the players their per-game salaries. It's interesting to note that the Players Union retained the right to file a grievance accusing Major League Baseball of all negotiations in bad faith. So even though we're moving ahead, the Players Union has retained the right to file agreements accusing Major League Baseball of negotiating in bad faith. So you might say, why has Ashley and I used this and brought it to your attention today if you weren't aware? Because this case study is a study in faulty negotiation that has left a bad taste in your mouth and my mouth and anybody who even observes the game of baseball, especially fans and advertisers that pay to see the game played. It was negotiation at its worst. In today's webinar, we will use this fiasco as a backdrop to arm you with best practice negotiation techniques played fairly with both sides winning. Okay, please, once again, chat in anything. We're talking about negotiation. We're going to take a shot at going through negotiation, but once again, please, we'd welcome anything you have to add to today's commentary. So if someone says, what is negotiation and why is it so important? Well, in simplistic terms, it's a method. Yes, a method through which you settle differences. Okay, so once again, it's a method to settle differences. It's a process through which compromise or agreement is reached while avoiding argument or dispute. Let me say that again. It's a process through which compromise or agreement is reached while avoiding argument or dispute. In any disagreement, you understandably aim to achieve the best possible outcome for your position. That being said, in negotiation, you seek mutual benefit and maintain a relationship, key to the successful outcome. Okay, so it's interesting, but while we're waiting for this program, there's one person on the call that said, oh my gosh, I do have a negotiation, I think, for a home, so I hope this is going to be helpful to you as you acquire your home. But you think about it, is negotiation is part of life. You negotiate with your spouse, your partner, your parents, your children, your friends. Today, we might have a parent who's in a home who wants to try to say, come in and visit me, or I want to come out, whatever else. There's so many situations today where you must negotiate. And you negotiate with retail merchants, real estate agents, and car dealers. And in the business environment, you negotiate with colleagues, managers, underwriters, claims, risk control, auditors, prospects, clients, and so much more. In today's program, we're going to cover the following. The difference between persuasion and negotiation. And guys, it's really critical we know the difference. Persuasion is very different from negotiation. We're also going to discuss why it's imperative you master the art of negotiation. As Cindy said, we're going to present essential skills for positive negotiation and ask you to add some skills if you would be so kind. We'll also reflect upon one of the most effective negotiators in history, and we're going to actually have a poll and see if you guys can guess who this person might be. And lastly, introduce you to a virtual learning experience on negotiation should you be inclined to want to go deep on the subject. Okay, so let's talk about persuasion and negotiation. So let's think about a situation that you might have, and I would suggest that persuasion begins first. It's a process through you attempt to influence another person's attitudes or behaviors. So would it be fair to say that you have a perspective on an issue, your perspective on life, and typically you would start saying, well, I want that person to understand and appreciate and accept my position. So it enables you to argue for or against ideas, decisions, and actions that have a material impact on you, your colleagues, your customers, and your families. Whether you realize it or not, you attempt to persuade others daily. And once again, persuasion begins because you believe in a stance and you think others should accept your stance. So I'd like you to take a moment, everybody on the call, and I know we have a large audience today, and think about a moment or think about a situation that occurred over the past few days, or maybe last week, whereby you were attempting to influence another person to accept an idea, action, decision that you believed in. It might have been a son or daughter. It might be a colleague. It might have been in the business setting, a client. It could have been a purchase of something. It might have been a parent. So think about, if you would, a situation, and I'd like to be silent for a moment and make sure you absorb that situation and think about what you did and how you acted. Okay, now let's evaluate your persuasion skills by having you ask yourself the following three questions. As I attempted to persuade, did I make sure I came across as credible? Was my persuasive position based on logic? And to persuade that person, did I appeal to the other person's emotions? Three really key questions. So when you present a persuasive case that appeals to the other person's emotions, you have a good chance of moving the other person to accept your recommended action or behavior. And in the business of insurance and risk management, you must use your credibility and logic to empower those whom you serve to make prudent decisions. And it is your persuasive arguments that drive emotion leading to action. So once again, everybody on this call, I would say, understands and lives persuasion all the time. And when you present a persuasive case that appeals to the other person's emotions, you have a good chance of moving the person to accept your recommended action or behavior. In the business of insurance and risk management, use your credibility and logic to empower those whom you serve to make prudent decisions. And it's your persuasiveness that drives emotion leading to action. Last night, I was flipping through the channels, and I said to my wife, Bobby, what I want to do is I want to go to CNN and flip to Fox and go back and forth and listen to newscasts. And what I think we see, and we're not getting to politics today, fortunately, is persuasion is virtually impossible if there's not credibility leading to trust. What's happening today in so many of our areas is it's almost impossible to persuade someone to take your stance if they don't have what? If they don't think you are credible or trustworthy. So what do you do if your persuasive stance is not embraced by the other party? In other words, you have tried to persuade, you've used logic, you've used a story or two, you've tried to help them understand your position. Do you give up? Do you get frustrated? No. Typically, you said, okay, it's now time to move to plan B. So what's plan B? Well, plan B is called negotiation. You've tried persuasion, it didn't work, or you couldn't move them all the way you wished. So you're courteous, you have listened, you've had the other person express their opinion, you've tried to use credibility and logic to shift this person's mindset, but you're sitting back and saying, guess what? They're not moving. I cannot persuade. For whatever reason, they're not moving. So would you agree this is really part of life and how we move ahead? And now we've reached the dead end and said, okay, persuasion's not working. We now move to negotiation. Now, in many cases, the other person is also trying to persuade you. They have an opinion. They're trying to say, wait a second, here's your opinion. Let me give you my view of the world. So having three boys who are now 29 to 39, I can say that life is really trying to understand their point of view, them trying to persuade you, you trying to persuade them. Now, Ashley's on the phone. We've worked together, Ashley, for what, 12 years?
Just about.
Just about. I can tell you, I am still trying to persuade her to think I know what I'm talking about. Correct, Ashley?
I do. You do your best.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to give you a stat that's shocking, and you can probably see it now. This is from Huffington Post, and this is just a shocker. And you might say, well, I just wanted to sit in and see what this guy had to say, but I challenge you to realize how important this is. People who do not learn negotiation skills are 60% less successful than those who do. And by the way, this is not just in the business setting, it's also in the personal setting. So simply put, negotiation enhances productivity and performance and is an essential element to increase revenue and profitability. So let me take a time out, and I'd like to go ahead and see if there's any questions that you've chatted in, any comments, any views of the world on negotiation, or even a story. Actually, anything that's come in yet?
Not yet, Scott. It looks like we're okay.
Okay, so please, if anyone has a story or any view of the world on negotiation or persuasion, please let us know. We're now going to shift to the military. And, we might think that a negotiation with a parent or a son or a daughter or a coworker is important, but we think about what happens in the military world, and some of you on the phone might be from a military family. The pressure, the intensity of the pressure to win outcomes involves life and death situations. So we'd suggest that nowhere is persuasion and negotiation more important. And there's so much to be learned from military officers around the globe who are under intense pressure to win outcomes that involve life and death situations. Now, Ashley and I would say, while the stakes of your negotiations may not carry the same consequences as the military, would you agree you do feel the same pressures to make rapid progress, project strength and control, and trade resources for cooperation? So we would like to go through 5 tactics that military leaders use, and listen carefully because we're going to ask you in a few moments to say, of these tactics, which one do you now use, and more importantly, which one do you think might be most important? Is that fair? So we're going to bring you into this next one. So in military world, military leaders are taught you must understand the big picture. Don't be myopic. Step back and try to attempt to discover what's the other person's point of view. And then use this knowledge to shape negotiation to achieve their objectives. But the first thing is saying, okay, let's look really big picture. The second is, are there any hidden agendas? Trying to find out what the other person's motives and concerns might be. Are the motives simply pure, or is there something behind that? Then the next would say, okay, if I'm going to negotiate, I need to somehow get genuine buy-in. And although military leaders have an arsenal of weapons at their disposal, they try to use data and facts rather than coercion to persuade. Let me share the facts. Let me have the data to go ahead and persuade. And most importantly, they're trying to build relationships on trust rather than fear. And this can be very different. While fear is a motivator, we agree there's no question it's a motivator, and we've seen that before many times, it is not the long-term solution. Each step of a military leader's plan involves trust leading to cooperation. And I would suggest that's part of the challenges we're having right now around the world is that if this is a key to building relationships on trust rather than fear, I think in many ways what's happening is it's fear that is leading the negotiations. And then lastly, always focused on the desired outcomes. Military leaders negotiate with purpose and defined missions. Although compromise is always part of the negotiation game, they never can take their eye off the desired outcome or outcomes. So let's go ahead, and if you chat in, from your perspective, we had, once again, Ashley, you can go back maybe to the first slide where we had the 5 military things. What do you think is the most important? Would it be understanding the big picture? Would it be trying to uncover any hidden agendas? Would it be trying to get buy-in from somebody? Would it be trying to build relationships based on trust? Would it be never deviating from focusing on the outcomes? Chat in what you think would be most important when you think about the art of negotiation. And hopefully we have a couple coming in.
Joanna said, number 4, you have to have trust first.
Yep. Very, very
Lisa
good.
said buy-in. Diana said trust. John, uncovering the hidden agendas. Kim said trust. Cindy said bring the data.
Yep.
We have trust. A lot of are based on trust. Most of the answers coming in are trust.
Well, thank you guys for doing it. Now we're going to shift to a movie I hope you all saw. If you haven't seen it, you've got to see it, but I think you most have, and that's Captain Phillips. And you can see the picture here, but just take yourself back into that incredible situation. And here we are, Tom Hanks, who's Captain Phillips. He actually lived out every one of these negotiation steps, every one of these. From the initial encounter with the pirates, Captain Phillips was looking big picture, attempting to understand the pirates' cause, negotiating to achieve buy-in. Desperate and challenged, he was doing everything in his power to do what? He was trying to build trust. He was trying to be credible. They spoke a different language, but his first thing is, if he's going to move them in a positive direction, he must go ahead and to communicate in a way that builds trust. So what was his outcome? From the first moment, he said, I must protect my crew. I must protect my ship. I must protect my country. The negotiation tactics of Tom Hanks were purposeful, strategic, and laser focused. And I hate to go back to baseball in the beginning, but it's very true. What's going to happen in 2021, where we have these incredible negotiations, is if you cannot somehow understand agendas and all the other things, but the key is, one, it can't get to trust, it's going to be very difficult to move ahead in any kind of negotiation, much less a persuasive argument. Anything else, Ashley, that came in?
Some more people just answered a lot of trust and building relationships, understanding the big picture. So a lot of people.
Well, that's very, very important. But remember also, I agree with you, but remember the others are also very essential. Try to understand big picture. Are there any hidden agendas? Trying to get their buy-in. And lastly, what are the outcomes you're trying to get? Okay. Now let's shift to 5 essential skills, and please know that we're going to give you 5 skills. We're not saying this is a be-all and end-all, and we'd like you to go ahead and comment on the skills we're going to give you, but also chat in or add any that you think would be most appropriate for today's discussion. So in your quest to become a top-notch negotiator, Beyond Insurance suggests 5 skills. Number 1, preparation and strategy. If you have a key negotiation, it is critical that you know your audience, you know the issue, you determine the desired outcome. Preparation is absolutely, totally key in every way. And you think about that situation, you had a big negotiation, that's what you did. You said, okay, I must know the issue. I must understand, what is my outcome? What am I trying to achieve? Who's my audience? Now, it's interesting, when you talk to your audience, it's really critical, because you think about it, there's different personalities you're dealing with. And different organizations have personalities, different individuals' personalities. You might have a person who is soft or hard or principled. A soft person, for example, that person uses a genuine style and would be more apt to yield to reasonable demands. That's a soft person. A hard person is going to apply pressure on you. They're going to make threats. They're going to see you as an adversary. Now, a principled person, they're saying, okay, they're principled, and they're focusing on solving the problem rather than intentions or motives of people involved. So before we move ahead in this, I'm going to actually ask you, which is the most difficult person to negotiate with? Is it someone who is soft, hard, or principled? Chat that in as we go forward. So wherever possible, if you can, whether it's an organization, try to understand how does that organization react? Are they one who is basically going to be really tough to deal with? Are they more likely to be lenient? Are they going to go ahead and be principled? Or the individual, it's very, very important. And you could also try to understand what tactics might they use. We say tactics, and I chose today to not get really deeply, but it's fascinating. If you want to go deep in negotiation, there are tactics that are taught in different organizations that range from bluffs to deadlines to games of chicken. It is also very important you're well-versed in the matters to be discussed. If the other person senses you might lack knowledge about the details, you're a prime target for a bluff or another technique that creates anxiety or uncertainty. People who have learned to negotiate can make you, who's a novice, very weak and insecure. So actually, let's go back and see what we have. How many people have put in soft, hard, or principled?
Most people said hard, Scott, and then the others said principled, and that seems to be the majority. Hard.
It's interesting. I have a middle son who's an incredible guy. He's a school teacher, taught English in Thailand for a while, and he's just someone in life. He is so darn principled. Let me give you a quick story. He's working at a private independent school outside of Philadelphia, was there in his first year, and he gave students in 10th and 11th grade C's and C minuses and B minuses and so forth. And these are parents that are paying, $35,000 a year to send their kids to a private school. And it became very apparent early on the parents were not going to accept a C or C minus or even a B minus because their children were not going to get into the Ivy League school of their choice. And they made Jeffrey feel very uncomfortable. And I said, Jeff, just give him a little bit higher grade. Give him instead of that B minus, just give him a B. Get him off the back of his dad. I am a teacher. I call it the way I see it. He goes, and he's so principled, and through being principled, he basically is willing to take more on. So he's worked through the issue, but there I saw being principled as one that actually brought more challenge on, which in his case, he was doing the right thing. But both you guys are right. A soft is very easy, or much easier, because once again, is you can use your logic, you can go ahead and use your persuasive arguments, you can use the facts and so forth to negotiate. Hard and principled are really tough. Now, top-tier negotiators come to meetings with a predetermined strategy, including target goals, and of interest, your first offer is usually the most important one, as it serves as an anchor through which all subsequent offers will be judged. So you think about it was, you must have an offer that might be not outlandish, but negotiators said that the first offer is very, very important. Okay, thank you very much for your participation in the first skill, which was critical, and that is obviously preparation and strategy. Now we move into active listening and body language. Now, you might say, well, it's much more difficult today. I'm sitting in my home. I really aren't meeting people in person. But when we define body language, even on Zoom, you might be able to pick up little nuances about clenched fists or even their facial features that might be helpful. Listen, listen, listen. The best negotiators act much like detectives. They ask probing questions and then stop talking. They follow the 80-20 rule. Listen 80% and talk only 20% of the time. And this is really difficult. I know I am very challenged with that. You have a point of view, a perspective, knowledge, wisdom. You want to put it out there. But great negotiators, actively listening. Active listening is more than just active listening is more than just learning what the other side is saying. It involves confirming your understanding of the other person's statement or seeking further clarification. So let me go ahead and help you define active listening. And tonight you might shock your kids, your spouse, or whomever it might be when you do this. Actually, I want to make sure I understand what you said. Cindy, I want to make sure you said this. Is that correct? So active listening is literally absorbing and repeating back what you believe you heard. It is a very complimentary technique, by the way. But here's a challenge with active listening. Would it be true that in many cases the way your brain works is, what should I say next? What should I say next to influence that person or to make that other person realize I'm on top of my game or a smart individual or that I know the issue? So as your brain is working, what's happening? You're not attentive. You're not listening. So if you bring active listening into your life and it forces you to say, Ashley or Cindy, I want to make sure what you said to me is blank. What does it make you do? You must listen carefully. Otherwise, you cannot exhibit the techniques of active listening. So understanding the other person's priorities is just important as your own, and that happens with active listening. There is a saying, by the way, among negotiators that whoever talks the most during negotiation loses. That's by Bobby Convict, the author of Everything is Negotiable. Listening is crucial to building trust. Once again, whoever talks the most in a negotiation goes ahead and loses. Okay.
We got a question that came in, maybe you could address. What can you do when you just can't get a straight answer to a question that you're asking?
So the other person is not only entrenched in their position, they're not willing to go ahead and to deal with you. It's virtually almost impossible to negotiate if someone is not acting in good faith and not going ahead and being transparent for their position. I would suggest you must ask them to say, look, we cannot, I am here to work with you to find a position that's going to work for both of us, but I can't move toward you if you cannot open up and let me know where you stand. You have to look them right in the eyes and let them know, and then be quiet. You have to ask them to please open up and say, please, I'm here to try to work with you. I'm here to find a solution. Certainly, I would love for you to feel as though I could persuade you of my position. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to find that you have to open up to me. But if that can't happen, you can't have a negotiation. I mean, think about it. If that person is hiding something, disguising something and so forth, I would simply say you must pull back and see if that person follows. But the timing is not right if that person can't open up and is somehow holding back with you. But I would hope if you very thoughtfully, very kindly challenge them to say, from your perspective, you want to move and find a solution, but ask them to join you in that pure endeavor. I hope that was helpful. Please chat in something else if it was not. Okay, I don't have the stats on the slide, but it's interesting. 93% of communication is nonverbal. So it makes it really interesting today when we're not actually meeting face-to-face. We're trying to go into Zoom meetings and so forth, a lot on the phone. So, but even having said that is, try to go ahead and where you can to understand where they're coming from. And this, by the way, can be accomplished with a Zoom call. But reading nonverbal communication is an essential part of negotiation. Body language, gestures, inconsistencies in verbal communications, incongruity, the nervous laugh, the clenched hands, the leaning back, often happens when the issues get hot. I work with a fellow who, when any kind of a negotiation, he would lean back and would start rocking back, and that was his way of being nervous. So body language is very, very important. Okay, so before we move ahead, any comments on active listening and body language? Any questions, comments there? Okay, so far we've gone through preparation strategy. We've gone through active listening. We now are there in skill 3, emotion, empathy, and optimism. And a lot of this emotion piece is going to be critical. Emotion plays a vital role in negotiations. Effective negotiators recognize that their objectives can only be achieved by taking negative emotion out of the equation. Frustration and anger lead to irrational behavior, which escalates conflict and breaks down negotiation. And this is what we see all the time. I mean, right now in front of us, a lot of the issues that are happening right in front of us, once again, the frustration and anger that's happening, which is negative emotion, leads to irrational behavior, which escalates the conflict and breaks down negotiation. Shouting, threatening, demanding is counterproductive. So many people today out there have never, ever learned or not even have any appreciation, no appreciation for the art of negotiation, which is very, very sad. Positive emotion, on the other hand, helps to maximize the opportunity for resolution. Even if the other person loses a cool, try to stay calm, patient, and friendly. That is the hardest part of negotiation, I would suggest, is when someone takes a low blow at you. They might take a low blow at your code of ethics, your family, your personal brand, whatever it may be, for you to literally go ahead and say that is a negotiation technique they're trying to play on me, and I'm not going to fall into the trap. Once again, cool, calm, patient, friendly. Now, closely tied to positive emotion is empathy. Your ability to sit in the other party's chair so you may appreciate their interests, constraints, alternatives, perspectives. That is sometimes very difficult, but the greatest negotiators are trying to say, okay, let me try to understand that person's perspective. Where do they come from? That is empathy. Empathy is a very, very powerful piece of negotiation because you must try to understand their point of view. If you do not understand what drives them, it's difficult to structure viable agreements. So I know you might have said, Scott, when I saw the name empathy, I'm saying, why does that fit in negotiation? But empathy is basically trying to understand and appreciate the other person's perspectives, which allows you to go ahead and mold your successful negotiation. And by the way, successful negotiations are also optimists. They aim high and expect the best outcomes. Your optimism may become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you expect more, you'll often get more. Conversely, if you have low expectations, you'll wind up with a less satisfying outcome. Research, by the way, substantiates that positive moods, increased flexible thinking, creative problem solving, and respect for others' perspectives. So let's put this all together, and please chat in a story, any comments, whether it's about empathy, optimism, emotion, and so forth. But if you think about it, you go in and you're a bear. You're angry, you're frustrated, you think they're unfair to you, you don't want to take your valuable time, your mood is not right, you really don't really care about their perspective, so the empathy is not there, and you're ready to just be a firecracker with emotion. You know where that's headed. It's not going to be a good situation. On the other hand, no matter how difficult the situation may be, if they look, I'm a negotiator, and negotiators have to pull away with how I'm feeling. I have to go in there and try to force a positive attitude. I have to try to understand their perspectives and use positive emotion. Please know you will be a great negotiator and win. Skill 4 is win-win, by the way, win-win solutions. But actually, did anyone chat in anything on emotion, empathy, optimism?
No comments right now, Scott.
Okay. Win-win solutions. Your goal should be to secure a good deal without taking advantage of the other party. You might say, what's this all about? Ashley and Scott, if you're a negotiator, don't you want to get the best you can in every situation? Well, let's think about it. It is a mistake if you attempt to unfairly win at any cost, regardless of ethics and negotiation. If the other person feels they've been cheated, it can damage your reputation and diminish your ability to negotiate with that person in the future. This is especially true if you'll be negotiating with the same person on a continuous basis. So let's think about it. Yes, you might win the battle, but eventually lose the war because somehow in your own community they said this person was really unfair to my family and unfair to me. This individual actually harmed my position on an account, put me in a very difficult situation. So the answer could be is the other person might have thought they had won the battle, but eventually loses the war. So that all being said, use facts and principles of fairness to persuade others. Arm them with ways to defend their decision to their critics and create useful precedents for future negotiations. That's really interesting and important. In many cases, a person cannot back down because they have a boss, a coworker, a spouse. But what you need to do in some cases, great negotiators realize you may want to arm them or defend them in a way in which they can go to their critics and say, look, here's why I did this. It's actually, in the long term, the best situation. Effective negotiators, by the way, recognize that their objectives are better achieved if they elicit buy-in rather than compliance from the other side. Win-win solutions require bargaining where there is give and take that happens. It is important that negotiation are results-oriented. In other words, you must be saying, what is the best long-term solution? Now, let's go back to tie in, once again, the importance of the 80-20 for a second. If you need time to think, and I would say the more time you are quiet, it gives you the chance to really think rather than talking about, okay, what would be a win-win? What move should I make? What questions should I ask, and so forth? So please know this all ties together. Now, 5 is closing the deal. Negotiation is like a chess match, as it not only requires a sense of the other party's next move, but several moves down the line. In closing the deal, you must have an end game in mind, which involves splitting the remaining difference. So those chess players, you have an advantage because you understand how chess is played. Now, when reaching an agreement, and this is something that I can tell you I have been burned and many have, is you have reached what you thought was a verbal agreement, and in your mind there was no question you had agreed upon that, but next thing you know, somehow it's misconstrued. That person doesn't agree to what was said. So in reaching an agreement, it's important the other side has the capacity to follow through with things they said they would do. That being said, get it in writing. Get them in writing. Take that email and follow up and say, I want to confirm with this and so forth. Have that in writing. Okay, we're getting near the end, but we have just enough time to ask you who in your mind was the most famous negotiator in history. It might have been your son or daughter. It might have been your spouse. It might have been a parent. But in all seriously, when you think about the most effective negotiator throughout history, who comes to your mind? Who is that famous person who spent his or her time dealing with both allies and adversaries to hammer out agreements that reconcile divergent interests? Please chat it in. Who in your mind was that incredible negotiator in your mind? Was it Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Tony Blair, Gandhi, Napoleon, Benjamin Franklin, Khrushchev? Was it JFK, Charles de Gaulle? In your mind, who is that person you think was the ultimate negotiator? Don't have to say why, just write down that, shout in that name.
I have George Washington and Jefferson, Lyndon Johnson, Gandhi.
Yep, great answers.
Gandhi, another one of those.
Okay, so you're all right. Everybody's right here, great answers, but the person I'm going to suggest, and let's even get it now, this person was able to accomplish the following in his role as a public servant. He forged peace with the Soviet Union, opened up negotiations with China, fostered diplomacy in the Middle East to end the Yom Kippur War, negotiated the Paris Peace Accords, and ended American involvement in Vietnam. Now, Henry Kissinger still remains for some controversial for his policies that he crafted. But having said that, even though there still may be some controversy, he is clearly seen as one of the greatest political negotiators of the 20th century. He served as a Secretary of State under Nixon and Ford. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973. Of interest, he was born in Bavaria, Germany in 1923 to a family of German Jews. He fled Germany at 15 years old as a result of Nazi persecution, and he arrived in New York City September 5th, 1938. Following high school, he enrolled in the City College of New York. His studies soon were interrupted, and he was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1943. And after a distinguished military career, he attended Harvard. He was recognized summa cum laude. Kissinger, by the way, must have had blood in his negotiation techniques, as his doctorate dissertation at Harvard was entitled Peace, Legitimacy, and Equilibrium. The August 2nd, 2018 New York Times article referred to Kissinger as a quick learner, a bold strategist, relentless pursuer. In studying his negotiation skills and tactics, and I suggest you do if you have an interest, it's apparent that his preparation and strategy, his active listening, his optimism, his win-win solutions, and his ability to close deals were essential ingredients to his negotiation success. Okay, so I'm going to go into something different, but any questions or comments so far? I have the last piece to go through. Anything, Ashley?
Not right now, Scott, no.
Okay. So at Beyond Insurance, we have done something pretty neat. We, in the last year or so, we actually started before COVID-19, said we have so much content in the organization. It could go from having researched emotional intelligence, having researched all sorts of different issues. So we're now putting things into different online programs. So as an example, I'm actually an introvert. People say I'm an extrovert. I'm really not. Something off tune here, but if a person who's an introvert typically gets energy out of small meetings, an extrovert goes to a big party, and that's where they get there. So you can kind of judge where you are. But anyhow, that's a research we did there. But anyhow, we've done a lot on negotiation. So if anyone has an interest, we actually have a virtual learning experience on negotiation. It's an online, self-paced skill development program. It contains tools, tactics, strategies, and solutions to enhance your success in the business of negotiation. So if you have an interest, go to our portal, beyondinsurance.com, and you will actually see something called a sales accelerator, and there's actually something on negotiation. As we leave today's program, consider using your negotiation skills to make sure your family, your friends, colleagues use proper COVID-19 protocols. You might say this is a neat program, but just note today that we may have to really go ahead with our culture and society if things continue to get worse, use like we've never done before, persuasive techniques or negotiation techniques. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and say thank you. If there's any finally comments or questions on negotiation, I hope this was helpful. Actually, let us know that. Actually, I'd like to thank you for fielding questions. And obviously, you've never had to negotiate with me because you've always persuaded me to do whatever you wanted. Is that correct?
There you go. That's the right answer.
Okay.
We do have a couple questions, Scott, if you have time.
Okay, yep.
Do you have any strategies for negotiating with carriers?
Sure. Number one, I go back in time. I didn't give much of my background, but I grew up at Johnson & Higgins. I ran their middle market area. I then got involved with Comcast, Penn, Campbell Soup, worked in the large account area. I started an agency from scratch in 1990, and I'll never forget meeting a fella, and he said, Scott, how do you negotiate with carriers? And I said, well, you make them realize that you're a team together serving the best interests of the client. And the guy smiles and laughs at me and says, Scott, let me tell you, you're not going to be successful in this business. He said, what you do is you try to get the best deal from the carrier, and then you squeeze, you punch, you do everything you can, and then you go above their head to get the deal. And if you haven't done that, your clients aren't going to want to do business with you. And I said, his name was Barry, who's now deceased. I said, Barry, that's not the way I will deal with underwriters, because you know what? We're a team together. We have to collaborate and win together on behalf of our clients. We're a team working together. And I'll never forget, he laughed and he said, you're not going to be successful. And, every move I made, I never forgot that comment. And you must somehow realize, and I'll just make a couple of comments, predictive analytics is a real challenge today. Underwriters are being suggested or even told you must go by the analytics. It's the data that drive decisions. And you might sit back and wait a second. Look at the loss ratio. Look at the risk profile improvement. Look at this. I'm telling you as a consultant and whatever, I'm telling you this is very important you understand this position. So I would say the first thing is really understanding, and I know it may not be the exact term, but are there somehow impediments to the underwriter to go ahead and buy in because there's external factors such as a underwriting position that's being taken? So the first thing I would say is to understand each other's world. Understand the world of the underwriter and they understand your world. Otherwise, if you don't, it's going to be very difficult to move ahead together.
Thank you. Now, we did get another question, the difference between negotiating and persuading. So I'm going to go ahead and put that slide back up. But Scott, if you want to make any comments about the differences there.
Yeah, I guarantee it's very simple. If you just think about the last situation you had, whoever asked that question, anybody on the phone, you have a position. Well, let me say, try to put it in another term. And if anybody wants to be part of this program on November 5th, August 5th, let us know. All of us are impacted by what is happening in the world today, and certainly we saw what happened in Minneapolis. But a very dear friend of mine is named Ben Brooks. Ben was the first African-American police officer in Pennsylvania in 1961. He rose to be the captain and basically led that department in Pennsylvania. Semi-retiring about 15 years ago, and he gets into diversity, and he's one of the foremost experts in the country today in that area. And we have a speaking on the subject matter. But anyhow, his comment is simply one of one's perspectives. And he said, you have to try to work hard to understand one's perspectives. But what we're getting at is that everybody has a mindset. So you are always trying to bring people and have them understand why you believe where you're. That's persuasion. You're trying to persuade people to take on your position. That's persuasion, right? Because you believe in your position. You believe your position is right for whatever reason. That's persuasion. You know, I can't believe you don't like chocolate ice cream. You got to be kidding me. Why vanilla ice cream? Let me tell you something. Here's why. You're trying to persuade people to try the ice cream you like, or persuade people to go ahead and to become a sports fan of something, or persuade people to go ahead and go to the theater because you have experienced that. That's persuasion. Negotiation is realizing, guess what? There's a middle ground. Persuasion, I would say, to make it simple, is having them come onto your side of the fence where negotiation is really meeting in the middle. Hopefully that's helpful.
Perfect.
Anything else?
I don't see any more questions now.
Well, Cindy, I will turn it back to you, and thank you very much. It's been our honor to be with you guys today. Cindy, thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much, Scott. That was a lot to process and a lot to think about, but I think we all got takeaways that we can maybe even start using that active listening today. So this webinar, just thanks everyone for joining us. This webinar has been recorded and will be posted to the SILA Foundation YouTube channel in the next couple of weeks. Scott's contact information is available in the webinar invite. I think it's also been popping up on the screen. So be sure to reach out to him and to Beyond Insurance if you've got specific or private questions you might have after we close. You will be receiving a post-webinar survey in your inbox. So be sure to fill that out and provide candid feedback that will help us improve. SILA Foundation provides these webinars free of charge as part of our mission and outreach. If you learned something of value today, please consider a personal or corporate donation to the foundation, since we rely on them to keep programs like these webinars going. Also, allow me to send another thank you out to 80 Banker for sponsoring today's webinar. I really hope to see you again next month, and thanks again, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.